Hi, everyone. Welcome to the latest and greatest episode of Failing Up. Today, I'm sitting down with John Gillen, the co-founder of True Capital and the podcast host of Milk Road Macro. In today's episode, we talk about the psychology of money, future predictions in markets, as well as government trust. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I have. John, how are you?
Hello, Claire. I'm doing well. How are you?
Nice to have you on a third time.
Pleasure
We'll
to be
be a
here.
fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, etc. Until we're 70 years old in this chair.
Okay. I didn't sign a consent form for that, but I'll have my lawyers look over the contract.
Sounds good.
Great.
First question off the gate. So a couple weeks ago, there was a really big incident that happened. You had explained to me, I didn't fully understand it. It was what, 15 to $19 billion of shorts got liquidated. And then there were a bunch of people saying, no crying in the casino. And then I saw this photo of a lighter that really struck a chord with me. It said, no one is an atheist at 50x leverage. Can you explain where that comes from, as well as more details on what actually happened?
Sure. So I think that in the popular crypto parlance, we're now referring to this as Flash Crash Friday.
Love that.
Yeah, so everything gets a name, Black Friday, whatever you want to call it. But I believe it was October 10th. There was a cascading series of liquidations on a number of exchanges, Binance, Hyperliquid, and many others, that liquidated. You quoted 15 to 19 billion. The estimates for this vary a lot, but the most reliable estimates I've seen have put it around 19 or 20 billion. I think that the real number is higher than that, but because of the nature of how some of these platforms operate in on-chain finance, it's a little bit difficult to say confidently. But it was a lot of money that was liquidated. I think somewhere around 2 million individual positions. I could be wrong on that, but somewhere around 2 million individual positions. In other words, individual trades that were set on the order books were liquidated. It was longs and shorts. It was mostly people who were long because it cascaded to the downside. But because of how much it cascaded and how far it went, how much it cleared the order books, shorts also got liquidated too. They call it auto deleveraging. They closed the position because there was no capital on the other side of the trade to keep it open any longer. So like a lot of this is kind of like complicated and a little bit in the weeds, wonky on-chain finance about how perpetual futures contracts work. But the gist of it is that there's this major market event. So what you're talking about of like 50x leverage or nobody's an atheist at 50x leverage and no crying in the casino, those are like sort of like jovial memes. Jovial. They're jokes, right? They're jokes that people are saying on Twitter or on X to make themselves sort of feel better and cope through the losses. So it's a little bit of humor to kind of take the edge off of what was a really, really brutal day for digital asset investors. So yeah, we can talk more about that in any capacity you want, but that's a little bit of what happened there.
So I think I want to talk about the evolving culture of investing and how the internet has helped shape that, because I feel like I have never seen people so openly promote what feels like loss. It's kind of like you being the butt of the joke is cool. It's a good thing. It's you can post it on all these Reddit threads. You can talk about it. You can post screenshots and be like, see you guys, like this is it, and I feel like people, there's been it literally is a casino. I do feel like it has turned into a casino. And can you explain how you think we got here with investing?
That's a very long it's because there's like a century of finance that led us up to this point. So I think a number of things that you're raising, one is like a cultural behavior around this. And then there's also the technical things of like how this, casino culture is able to sustain itself and do business. And then, what led to the conversion into a casino culture. So in any marketplace, any market participant is going to be able to treat that market differently based on their objectives, their interests, and what their intentions or purposes are there. So a person could invest in the digital asset market. Well, let's just use the stock market in general, right? Theoretically, those markets are supposed to be about capital formation. They're supposed to be a way for publicly traded companies who have made the necessary disclosures in compliance with laws and regulations to formulate capital, raise money, basically, to fund and expand their business practices and further their enterprises, basically. There are people who invest in that because they believe in the companies in the index or individual assets, stocks in the equities market. Or there are people who invest on it because they're speculating on future appreciation. There are people who are investing on it because, for example, like Bill Gates had a huge short position on Tesla, which he lost a lot of money on and had to close, right? So like everybody has a different thesis, a different reason for coming to those markets. The aspect of of culture, I guess, that you're referring to that has started to treat this much more and more like speculation to the point of approximating gambling, has been something that's, I think, always been present to some degree in our culture, like going back to 1929, like greed and like margin buying that started then. It's always been there, but it's gotten more prevalent, more popular. And I guess the internet has expedited that. It has created new tools to do that. Digital assets certainly has done that in many ways. But then also the internet has given a place for community to form around these things and for people to share and celebrate their wins, but also form community and bond around losses as well. So like, you know, like what you're saying is like if somebody gets liquidated for a lot of money, they'll still post that and, you know, engage with friends, followers online and build community around, you know, they got wrecked in the casino and like, you know, I'm
the
down
casino.
bad. Yeah, exactly.
Down bad.
Yeah. So there's all these different pieces of it. One is cultural. One is the technologies that have not only enabled the communication, but also facilitated the trading activity. And then there's also the financial aspect of it as well, which like they're all always present, but always changing. And they're all kind of contributing to where we are now.
But going back a little bit more to the historical context, because you had told me a while back, investors were told early on to save in banks after the Great Depression. And today the message seems to have completely inverted to literally borrow money to trade it. What changed psychologically and structurally?
So just to kind of elaborate on this point, one of the things that the prior generations had to deal with was converting people from savers to investors. So what I mean by that is after the Great Depression, a lot of people, there's an entire generation of Americans who didn't trust banks, didn't trust finance, didn't trust investments of almost any kind. They kept their money, buried in the yard or under the mattress or something like that. So there was a great need for Wall Street to sort of reestablish faith, credibility. They had to bring in a bunch of different government programs, laws, regulations, disclosures, and that's still developing today. But they had to restore investor confidence in not only the banking system, but also the financial system of the United States to convert people from savers who just hoarded their money under their mattress into investors who were actively participating in the financial economy and the financial activities of the United States. This unlocked a lot of capital, unlocked a lot of economic activity, financial activity, and stimulated a lot of growth for the country. However, now we're in a situation where we've pivoted away from, struggling to get people from keeping their money under their mattress to invest it in the market. Now the struggle, I think, is more of one of converting people who are treating the market like gambling into investors again. So it's savers to investors was a historical problem. Now we're trying to convert people who are gambling into investors. And what I mean by that is that a lot of people, like you said, what changed psychologically and structurally, I think we're in a much different place in terms of the real value of people's wages and their currency and their capital, such that it almost necessitates some sort of radical speculation on the part of participants in our marketplaces and our economies to get some huge windfall result that changes their circumstances, because they don't view saving and investing, marginal investing, as a way to, over time, accumulate wealth and lead to a better future. And so they've sort of lost hope and faith in the banking system and the financial system to, over time, over the course of their lifetime, leave them in a place where they are better off and their families are better off and their wealth and capital are protected. So what happens is that people have very little purchasing power. At the end of the month, if they have a couple $100 left over, they have a choice if they want to, just buy an index fund, invest that in some other capacity, or treat that like a lottery ticket or a poker chip and go take a big swing at something. And if it works out, great. But if it doesn't, they haven't really lost anything in their minds because they were never going to get wealthy anyway. So I think that the challenge now is to persuade those people that there's a better way to treat their capital than just a poker chip or a lottery ticket, and to show them ways to responsibly and sustainably invest in the market such that they have hope and credible faith, right, that there will be a future where they're going to be financially stable and that it's worth their time to do that education and to protect their capital and not just be so speculative with it.
Do you think there's going to be a point, because I feel like a large part of this has been social media's impact? Like, for example, Open Door is a stock that exploded overnight. We saw it with Beyond Meat that went up, 1,200%. GameStop, I feel like, was one of the OGs with that. But Beyond Meat went up 1,200%, crashed by 80% all within a day. And I feel like this used to be only this kind of swings of like this volatility. I feel like we saw a lot of this in crypto, but now I feel like it's completely reached Wall Street, like regular stocks. Do you ever see a world in which social media might be regulated for those reasons?
So I think you're putting your finger on a number of problems all at once. I think that social media is facilitating some of these things in certain ways. I don't know that it's so much a social media problem as it is necessarily like a financial one, right? So I think that in the popular parlance, we call this the big hot ball of money. There's a bunch of capital that is just rampantly speculating and looking for the next opportunity. There's so much liquidity that the Federal Reserve and the monetary system has dumped into our economy that people are almost desperate in some cases to find alpha, ways to outperform. You've seen this not just in the examples that you listed, but in the oversubscription of initial public offerings or IPOs of companies this year. Right, like these underwriters will say that the stock should trade at this price, and they'll list it at that. The IPO happens, and it jumps up, many times what they thought the fair price would be, because they're underestimating how much demand there is in the market for alpha, for places to put capital. Because everything feels like it's overpriced and people are still trying to get returns. So they're willing to take more risks. And there's just this, like we said, this big hot ball of money that's chasing, it's going to gold, right? Which is like a 10,000-year-old financial asset. There's been a huge run up in gold because there's been a lot of speculation in the run up in gold, and that begets more and more attention. And so we've seen a correction in gold off of its peak. But nothing is immune from this if it's a financial asset, because there's just too much nominal liquidity, just like dollars, paper in the system, and it needs to find somewhere to go, and is trying to outperform inflation and debasement of the currency. So you could say that we need some sort of referee on social media for this. To me, that's like not really addressing the problem, because it's a much larger systemic monetary, economic, social, cultural issue. And social media is just one of the tools people are using to communicate about those things, not really driving what's happening.
But what do you think could be the solution, I guess? How could investors today stop YOLOing all of their money into Fartcoin 99 or something?
So this is something I'm really passionate about personally, and I've devoted a part of my career to, especially recently, to focusing on, which it sounds boring, it sounds lame, but the correct answer, I think, to this question is education. Because you can't really rely on the people who are providing these services or products to educate their users, because they don't necessarily benefit from that, right? Like if Robinhood or Coinbase, not to like single out any specific person or company, but if the people who are offering access to these financial instruments are given the responsibility of educating their users about them and how to use them responsibly, it's not so much in their best interest to teach them hey, it's probably not a great idea to use 1001x on our platform. Just because we offer 1001x leverage doesn't mean you should use it. That's available on Aster, which is a decentralized 1001
For those who
leverage.
don't understand what leverage is, could you explain the risk, like the upside and the downside of 1000x leverage?
So leverage is something that, it's a colloquial term. Well, it's just a generalized term that's used in finance for marginal borrowing of other people's capital to increase your position. So you put up, let's say, like if I was using 1001x leverage on Aster, I'd put up $100 of USDC or some other asset, and then I would use that on margin to 1001x my $100 and put $101,000 on a position, and bet basically whether or not that price of whatever asset I'm speculating on is going to go up or down. Now, the way those contracts are drawn, the higher the marginal leverage you use, the tighter the range is for your stop losses. In other words, where you get liquidated and lose your initial $100 if the price moves against you in one way or the other. So leverage, that's how people are using it in some sense of these speculation in perpetual futures contracts in digital assets. Leverage originally, well, I don't know about originally, but the way leverage responsibly has been used in wealth management in the past, just as one example, there's a lot of them. But if you have a large exposure to something, right, with your business, and you want to hedge your position, in other words, alleviate yourself of risks to change in the value of your portfolio based on price fluctuations of something that you're holding a lot of, you can take a portion of your capital and use leverage to go, like if you're really long on something, you can go short on that same thing, and that sort of hedges out your position. So it doesn't matter which way the price moves, the value of your capital and your overall portfolio won't move against you in one way or the other. So it's a risk management tool, right? It's the way it's supposed to be used. It's not supposed to be used to say, like, I have $100, let me bet $100,000 on whether or not Bitcoin goes up or down in the next 2 seconds, right? So that's kind of where, like, the this was used as a tool for wealth management and protecting one's capital against movements and fluctuations in prices in the market, but it is now being used as a very, very powerful and dangerous tool for speculation. So I think education is what kind of like helps people see like, okay, maybe this is not the right tool for me to use, or this is not the right way to behave with this particular financial product. But I think, that has to come from other places than the platform that's offering the
How
tool.
financially illiterate is the U.S.?
I think, extremely. We're all very financially illiterate, but there's an advantage to that too,
And what's the advantage? You're willing to bet 50x.
Part of it, yeah. I mean, like, there's a lot of people who make a lot of money. There's a huge amount of revenue that's generated from offering gambling of many kinds to the public. There's a financial reason for that. There's a lot of reasons it's easier to control people if they don't understand how you're taking advantage of them. So a lot of people benefit from that system. I think people are educated with enough information to be able to function and do a factory worker job, right? It's like the goal of the educational system, but they're not really intelligent enough or financially literate enough to be responsible for managing their own capital in the jungle of investing we have today.
And to be a good investor, what are some of the traits that you should have?
I think that you should be aware of the pitfalls and predators of the space. And so, again, this is an education thing, but you have to be aware of how your own psychology can be weaponized against you. You have to be aware of the larger macroeconomic landscape that you're operating in and the monetary landscape you're in. So it's not enough to just say, like, I know how to use the buy or sell button. You need to be, I think, much more educated on a lot of the regulations, the rules, and just the broader context in which you're operating. And so that takes a lot of legwork. There's a lot of misinformation, miseducation. There's a lot of people who think they understand things that don't. So this is like a large problem, but I think it starts with understanding your own psychology and then the market. And you have to understand, like, the way I break it down for people is the monetary system, the economic system, and then just the overall marketplace. There's a lot that goes into that, but it's a constant thing too. It never concludes either, because, even in the last few years, there've been a number of financial instruments that never existed before, which have been created, battle tested, risen to prominence, and are now rapidly gaining adoption in the global monetary and economic systems, stablecoins being one of them, right? So, it's a continual lifelong process of education.
Yeah, because I feel like, the part that's crazy to me, and everyone can agree on this, was that when I was a kid, and I'm sure if anyone went through the American education system, you are not taught about how to buy a house, how to save for a house, how to budget. Literally, that is something I learned from my parents. I'm horrible at it, by the way, but that's something I literally learned from my parents. Not once was I taught that in school. And I feel like...
But you know the Pythagorean theorem, though, right?
Barely. No, it's crazy. We learn about pi, we learn about triangles, we learn about multiplication, division, but we don't learn how to multiply our money. That's crazy.
Yeah, I think of it less about multiplying your money, because I think that in and of itself, right, implies that you need to get 5x, 10x, whatever. I think of it more in terms of protecting your capital, because if all of your economic output is being converted into an asset of whatever kind, you need to understand how that's being protected, how it's gaining or losing value, and what goes into that. So it's more about protecting yourself from the slow erosion of value than it is about how can you get a 10x or double your money or something like that. So I think that mindset shift is a helpful thing for a lot of investors too.
So moving into more of the sports betting parallel, because I still want to talk about that. Americans wagered $149.9 billion on sports in 2024.
Bullish.
Excuse me. And a U.S. news survey found that 25% of bettors missed bills and 30% carry gambling-related debt. Why do you think we are normalizing financial self-harm as entertainment?
It's good for business. I think that, this kind of gets back to what I was saying before, right? Like, you can view this as entertainment. You can use it as speculation. There's a lot of things you can use a marketplace for. You can use it to distribute risk. You can use it to generate revenue, to bring in more capital. You can use it for speculation. You can use it as an information generating machine, right? Like a prediction market will tell you information about what the collective thinks, but you can also use it for entertainment. And I think that's always been, like, betting on sporting events goes back to, like, probably the Olympics or sooner even. I don't even know, but it's a very long-standing thing. I think the reason it's gotten more accepted of late is that there is a larger and larger amount, the big hot ball of money that I talked about before is getting bigger and bigger. There's more and more capital there to the tune of like, I think now you could probably say like trillions, right? And so because of all of that economic power and opportunity there, governments are shifting to be more accommodative of that and to try to create policy that, you know, has some safeguards and protections, but in general is more accommodative of entertainment and financial speculation and financial entertainment, however you want to call that. But
are we witnessing the rise of fiscal nihilism, where people no longer view money as something to preserve, but instead something to experience?
Yeah. So this is kind of what I was alluding to before, right? It's like because people don't feel like there is a hope for a better financial future for them, they are treating their money like poker chips, like lottery tickets, or just like entertainment, right? And so they're more concerned with, you know, am I going to enjoy this $500 this weekend with my buddies versus would investing this in a different way change the outcome of my future 20 years from now? So that's a mindset shift that's definitely happened. And financial nihilism is, I think, at the root of a lot of these things. But
dive deeper than that. I think we had talked a little bit earlier about how this is related to more of like the potential male loneliness epidemic that we're talking about. It's like men in particular do feel hopeless.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that there's a large portion of the population that never gets any attention from women, that never gets a date with women, never gets, they swipe 2 million times on a dating app and get one conversation out of it. So there's a feeling that, you know, women are by nature hypergamous, and so they seek out mates who have some degree of high status. And one way that a few ways that men can increase their status in the dating marketplace. None of this is new information, but this is, I think, what's generally been observed. One of the ways that men can increase their value in the dating marketplace is by working out, getting like more physically fit, or by increasing the amount of money that they have, because then they can buy things, they can get access to experiences, and that kind of increases their social status, which gives them a higher degree of possibility of getting a chance to have a romantic relationship with a woman. So there are a lot of people men who fall into that category of involuntary celibates, incels, and, you know, not to be like harsh or critical about that, but that's the circumstances that they've economically been placed in. And so they don't feel like they have status that makes them desirable to mates. And so they're more likely to be like, well, nobody cares about me anyway. Nobody sees any value in me unless I have money, right? So that leads to this distorted view that money is the only thing that matters. It's the only value that they offer. And so they're much more likely to take, you know, more and more risk-seeking behaviors to try to accumulate wealth as a way to get social status and respect from men and attention and romantic attention from women.
And why don't you think women do the same thing in terms of like, actually, I'm very curious as to how this relates to gender, because I personally, when I was in college, I used to bet on every single playoff game with my friends, and everyone would bet against me because I lose every single time. But I've never felt, actually, no, what am I talking about? I lost in 2021, the last real bear market, I lost everything. In crypto, it was probably like 18% of my net worth, which at the time was close to nothing. But I remember I came back to my parents and I was crying and I was like, I have to tell you guys something, because it was when Luna had crashed. And then after FTX went down, and I lost literally everything. And I was crying to my parents and I was like, I made a really big mistake and I lost like $6,000, $7,000. My parents were like, oh my God, Claire, that's so much money to you. What are you doing? And I was like, oh my God, you're so right. Never again. Ended up still gambling some away. But my question I was getting to is, what do you think it relates to gender, as men do tend to gamble, love to sit in front of the TV on Sundays with the boys, and like love to play fantasy football? Women don't really seem to be interested in that. Why is that?
Well, as somebody who doesn't do those things myself, I would be speculating. I love to play sports. I don't really like to watch them unless it's like the Super Bowl, the World Series. But I think that it's a social thing. It's a communal thing. I think it's a way of forming camaraderie, fellowship. And I think, look, you'd have to ask people who are more like in that culture, like what they're getting out of it. But I really do think it's a form of fraternity, a form of brotherhood, fellowship. And I think that women do these things in different ways. ways, right? Like there's different things that masculine or feminine energies will do to create bonds of friendship with one another. So like, for example, one thing that men do that women don't do is we like to break a lot of like little social rules with each other. And then if you can do some little transgressive thing with
Explain.
a guy, so it's like telling dirty jokes or something like that, right?
Okay.
Like
It's like you test the boundaries.
Yeah, it's exactly right. Right.
Test the waters?
Men like to test boundaries. We like to break little rules that are like low risk ways of establishing trust, right? Because it's like, okay, well, if I can do something that's a little bit outside of the rules with you, then it means I can trust you, and then like it creates a bond of friendship and fraternity. It's another thing. Like men will like frequently like yell at each other, ridicule each other at the gym as a way of like motivating one another. But then once like the person like does another rep or whatever it is, then they all celebrate together. So I think there's different customs that like masculine and feminine energies use to establish trust with one another and develop bonds of friendship and fellowship. So there's different behaviors that are like, social sexuality that goes into that. But yeah, I mean, like I don't do that myself. I don't think that's the other thing too is it's a very addictive thing. It's a dopamine weaponization, right? Like you're identifying with the team. Like you've seen these videos of people online smashing the TV when their team loses because they've had a lot of money invested in it. Their identity is invested in it. I try not to invest my identity in things like sports teams or things like that. So it's just not something I personally do, but I think it's a sense of belonging that has been lost that they're recapturing through these activities.
Oh, interesting. And do you think any of that could potentially be coming from, I feel like it's like dopamine overwhelm right now?
Absolutely.
I always love to correlate back to social media, but I do feel like everyone wants a quick hit of something. So if it's gambling, if it's dating apps, if it's social media, I just feel like it's so easily accessible to you. And I do genuinely believe that's why people are getting a lot more irritated. So there was this interesting report that I read from the We Have Data Instagram account, which I love. They have a bunch of the most interesting charts. And it basically said, if you look at the percentage of people who leave these Reddit threads of like asking relationship advice, the percentage of people that have told these people to break up when they give relationship advice has gone up substantially. And also though, there's been a huge increase of Russian bot accounts that have been created on Reddit to create like more of this division that we have.
Was there a question? Okay, so I think you hit on one thing, which is like the quick hit of dopamine, right? I think in general, a lot of what technology is doing is hijacking and weaponizing our innate natural reward systems against us. Social media does this, like Instagram, Facebook, but then like, pornography, gambling, a lot of the sites that offer these sort of like high leverage, high risk financial instruments are gamified. They have like a lot of bright colors and like confetti and celebration when
Robinhood got in trouble. I got the data that Robinhood got in trouble for making it too gamified. They literally got fined, I think. Yeah, for making trading like a game to lure inexperienced investors. Yeah,
so it works, right? So there's a reason that they do this, but I think that in different ways, a lot of these different things, it's great if your customer wants your product. It's better if your customer believes that they need your product. So what using these reward systems against us does is that it creates this illusion of dependence, sort of like an addiction response. And then it's not just a quick, low friction hit of dopamine. It is like sitting down at a table and eating a whole bowl of sugar level, like indulgence of these innate natural things, but to an extreme degree. Like an inordinate affection is what the Bible calls it. But that's one of the reasons why it's such a big problem, is that our nervous systems, our reward systems, our innate natural desires are not set up to cope with these enormous amounts of low friction dopamine satisfaction, like dosages, basically. And so you're seeing that in a lot of different ways, like pornography, social media, gambling, whatever version of this you want to see. There's a lot of different flavors of that are coming up, and they're all they're all impacting our society simultaneously in different ways, and they're all interconnected, I think, too.
And how do you, as someone who invests, see past that part?
I just don't do it. I mean, like, I just don't do that. I think it was a learning curve for me too, right? Like, I never...
Because you don't use leverage.
No, I don't use leverage. I've never bought a meme coin. I've really like...
You've never bought a meme...
I've never bought a meme
not
coin.
Not even AI-16Z? Not even Trump's token or Melania's? Are you kidding me?
I have like several times been like, I'm going to buy $100 of Dogecoin just for, whatever vibes, right? But every time I go to do it, I'm like, I don't want to do this. I don't believe in the value. This is a waste of money. Like, what am I doing? And then I go find a different asset to invest in. I treat my capital like capital. I'm trying to preserve my purchasing power. The reason for this is not just because I want to get rich. It's because I am very personally motivated by art, filmmaking, communication, songs and poetry and things like that. And I want to have financial independence to live my life the way I want to live it and the way that I'm meant to live it, right? This is what Kant defined as liberty, which is the freedom to do what you ought to do. In other words, to live your life in the way that you were made to, the way that is healthy for you and your community, and to have like abundance and well-being. And so I see, like, when you reduce it back down to these like daily decisions, right? Is YOLOing $100 on Dogecoin or something else going to bring me closer to a fulfilling life of liberty and well-being and abundance? Or is it going to, keep me caught in a continual chase of the next hit of dopamine? And so that's kind of how I've like approached it myself. I don't look at it like $100 or something like that. I look at it as storing up value for a future and a reality that I want to have, a life I want to live, that I think I'm meant to have, a healthy life, right? So I try to think of it in those terms. And then, you rewire. Look, these reward systems that we have can be very healthy for us if we are careful about how we allow them to operate and what we allow into our nervous systems, our sensory systems. And so that you can train your dopamine, serotonin systems, all these different things to be supportive and encouraging of healthy effort, healthy challenges, and growth. And like that's one way you get stronger, you get more financially independent, healthier emotionally, and grow in a lot of other ways. But it's very easy to get addicted to sugar or to pornography or to gambling. And so that it's just like, the devil is cheap dopamine. So you have to like know that and then take whatever steps are necessary for you or find other support groups. Try not to do it all on your own. Don't just white knuckle it if you're struggling with these things. You're not in it alone, I think is a big thing. The opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's community. And so education is a big piece of this, but doing it in a group, in fellowship with other people who share similar goals, similar obstacles and struggles, so you can learn from and support one another. Those are all ways to success. But you're not broken, you're not dumb, you're not wrong. You've just had other people outside of you in your environment know things about how your reward systems work, and they've hijacked them. And so you have to work for yourself to rebalance, rewire, reorient towards things that are healthy, and do it because it's good for you and for the life that you want to have and will lead to your well-being and happiness and flourishing, not because, you want to be part of the community on Reddit posting about Dogecoin. And the Russian bots thing, by the way, this is a huge problem that I think digital assets is uniquely suited to solve for, because as we get more and more agentic operators, AI operating online, there's going to be even more, not just bots, but AI agents that are going online specifically to sow discord, to sow social unrest and division. And so I think the digital ID, decentralized non-sovereign identification, right, is something that blockchain and digital assets is uniquely situated to help with. And I think as we get more and more artificial intelligence operators online that are hostile actors, either from internal or external state actors or non-state actors, we are going to need to leverage these technology tools to protect ourselves from those things, because we want to be able to understand, like if I go online and I'm interacting with Claire, I want to know that it's Claire, not 600 AI operating agents that look, sound, talk, and speak exactly like Claire does, but are trying to destroy me, right? So like there's a big watershed moment we're coming to as a society where we have to figure out what we do about decentralized digital identity and who we trust with that and how it operates. It's a big subject, but it's a growing problem, and it's going to get worse. And now a sneeze.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's okay. I was done. I
almost have to sneeze. So I was like, oh, he's saying something important. I was like, oh, please wait until he's done. Yeah. So you just said a lot.
Yeah.
You just said
Sorry.
You just yapped, which good for you. I love that. So let me respond.
You raise like 4 or 5 things every time you ask a question, and sometimes I just get lost in the answers.
Thank God.
Sorry. Okay.
So I think addressing the first part of what you said in regards to people, our dopamine systems being hijacked, I think the way I view it is like a shortcut to everything. It's like all these systems that exist and are in place. Social media, I argue that a lot of what we use LLMs for is just literally shortcutting. It feels like I'm shortcutting my way through everything. And so I've caught myself And I've noticed, yeah, the internet shows you a lot of negative content to, again, keep you, like reinforce that dopamine or stress or all these emotions that they want you to feel. But I've noticed that I have become more impatient. Like if my phone doesn't work for a second, I'm like, oh, this is so annoying. And I just said, why am I getting so frustrated? There's no reason for me to be frustrated. And again, you just have to ground yourself and bring yourself back to baseline, because again, it's not that serious. So I do feel like there has been a sense of everything is handed to us so easily, and we have everything. DoorDash, optimize every single part of your life and every aspect of your life. And so I think that I agree is like part of so many different branches of issues that contribute to the overall part of the hijacking of our dopamine. And I think the symptoms of that are irritability, frustration, anxiety, stress. So I feel like all in moderation is fine. But I think the issues with the traders as well is, like you said, is that they don't have any hope. And then second of all, I want to talk about your point regarding the how blockchain is suited for individual identification for social media, because a lot of these bots exist online. Why isn't that started happening yet? Why hasn't that been something that we've implemented yet? And how do you see that rolling out in the future? Because I haven't seen anyone do anything about the bots. It's been more so we know it's a problem, but we've seen it happen in advertisements. There's advertisements of using deepfakes of celebrities. There was a Jensen Huang scam that happened where Neil deGrasse Tyson. Yeah, so he was used in a deepfake as well for an advertisement. All I've seen is that these are issues that keep progressing and getting worse.
So I think, again, two separate subjects, but the first one I'll say I very much agree. I believe it was Viktor Frankl said that between the stimulus and the response is a space of time. And in that space of time is where we get to exercise decision making. And all of these different things you've described about, impatience, et cetera, all these can be described broadly under the category of emotional dysregulation. So one of the symptoms of having our dopamine systems are just our natural, not just dopamine, but all the different reward systems that we have innate in our nervous system, having them hijacked and weaponized against us, is this like rise in personality disorders, emotional dysregulation. So that gap, that space of time between the impetus, the stimulus, like I'm hungry, I'm horny, whatever it is, whatever need the thing is, and your action, elongating that space of time is usually a good idea because it allows you to think more deeply and more, let's say, self-interestedly about what response you make to the feeling that you're having and what action you take as a response. And therefore, you can usually use more discernment and make better decisions and regulate your emotions more so. There's a formula, I can't remember exactly what it is, but in college, I studied engineering a little bit in college, and we talked about collisions and car accidents. And there's this formula, but the denominator had time in it. And all of the different innovations they've come up with to make people more safe in car accidents are designed to elongate the amount of time that happens between the car hitting an object or the accident happening and the human body impacting the car and the force that's applied there in impacting the human body. So it's all about increasing the amount of time that these things happen under. And that is one of the best ways to help protect yourself. That's why meditation and mindfulness are so important to do. That's why it's a good idea if you ever feel agitated, upset, irritated, alert, dysregulated, that you take some time away by yourself to calm down, regulate your emotions. So that's one of the biggest things I would tell people is try to expand the amount of time that you give yourself to take action, to think about things. And if you sense dysregulation rising up in yourself, give yourself time to regulate your emotions first. The other thing about digital assets and blockchain, why we haven't seen this adopted yet, I think that because a lot of these technologies are still very nascent.
Sorry, I'm laughing because we just like...
well, you asked two things at once, I'll ask you two things at once. Well, we'll talk about blockchain later.
No, okay, hold on.
What do you think about what I just said about time?
I'm not done with what you just said.
Sure, go ahead. Yeah, we can stay on this.
I love our conversations. So good.
ADHD is a hell of a drug.
It really is. It really is. You know what? We might as well add a third topic at this point.
Why not?
So I think what I was going to ask you as a follow on to that was, what are ways, like I love some of the details that you gave us about the ways you can kind of give yourself that space, but what are ways you don't even get into that cycle to begin with? if that makes sense. So I feel like a lot of people are addicted to social media. There's a lot of people who are addicted to gambling. You said you've never even fallen into that to begin with, right? So how do you slowly bring yourself out of those places?
Again, I think that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's community. And I think that, in Alcoholics Anonymous, if you feel yourself wanting to drink, you're supposed to call somebody else, right?
Yeah.
So there are a number of different strategies that other people have pioneered and preached to sort of like deal with some of these things. I think it's really about availing yourself of information, education about what strategies other people have used, and then trying them for yourself to find what's effective. Calling someone else might work really well for you. It might not. Having a written down list of like reasons why you don't want to do that thing and reviewing it, right, might be helpful. You can use, in certain situations, technology might help, right? Like if you want to put a lock or like some sort of parental control on certain apps on your phone, whatever it might be. So it really comes down to the individual. Avail yourself of information of other things that people have done that have worked for them. Try them for you. Find what works. Figure out what that balance is for yourself. And it's really about, finding what feels as healthy for you, what capacity you're comfortable with. Like some people might be okay buying in for $5 at a poker game, but betting $10,000 on the outcome of a regular season football game might be, unhealthy for you and not something you can sustain. So everybody has to kind of like explore that for themselves and find what works and what's effective.
Thank you. That's good advice. Now back to the other topic that we were talking about, which the recap for the listeners.
Your segues are not getting better, by the way.
Okay, you know what? I really don't need this from you right now.
You're welcome.
From the listeners, or that we were talking about how blockchain is uniquely qualified to make it so there are less bots that infiltrate everything and all these deep fakes.
Why?
Yeah. No, continue what you
were sure. Yeah. So, okay. So there's a guy named Sergey Nazarov who is the co-founder of Chainlink, which is a digital asset focused project. He says that what blockchain and digital assets can do is transition us from a world and a system of trust to truth. So what does that mean? So all of these different systems that we have in the legacy system, they're all based on trust, right? Like I got this contract notarized, or I pinky promised that I did this right, or this FINRA says that this guy is trustworthy, whatever the case might be. The reason why blockchain technology is so important and transformative is that you no longer have to trust people. It creates what we call a trustless system, a trustless state, where all of this information can be preserved on the blockchain in a tamper-proof environment that is secured through decentralized computational power, right? So you don't have to trust the Federal Reserve. You don't have to trust some other bank. You don't have to trust, some university that stamps a piece of paper and says that Claire went here for 4 years and got this degree. It can all be stored and verified 24/7 on a digital asset ecosystem. And so that's one of the big things that this technology can offer. As it relates to decentralized identity, there's a lot of dystopian scenarios where this gets really just like bad, I think, right? Like there's a lot of fears about central bank digital currencies giving the government increased power of surveillance and control over people's capital. If the government has your ID and all of your information on a centralized server and you do something politically they don't like, they can delete you, right? So there's a lot of risks that come from trusting a centralized actor with this kind of power, which is one of the reasons why I think it's so important to educate people about blockchain, because then you don't have to trust other people or other organizations. We can all kind of live in a trustless state of truth, and that I think is a reality in a future that would be advantageous to everybody, but it hasn't gotten to mass adoption yet, and we're still at the early stages of education and even designing and deploying some of these technologies. There's still early phases of all of that, but I think we are going to need some sort of solution for that, and I hope it's one that's decentralized and not one that's highly centralized like we're seeing in China and other places.
Yeah, because I mean, in terms of the privacy issue, I know nothing about this, so I'm not going to pretend to, but how bad is our privacy issue? Like, how intense are we being surveilled in the US? I am aware I always accept all cookies on every single website. I just don't care. I just don't feel like anything is... I'm big into privacy, okay? But to an extent, it's also like, if you were to tell me the FBI and the CIA are looking into every one of my browsers or looking at my history, my ChatGPT history, I would be okay with that, because I genuinely feel like I have nothing to hide. So from your perspective, I feel like you are super, super pro privacy. Can you help me understand why this is like such a big deal? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think if you have no privacy, you have no autonomy and no agency. And just because you have nothing to hide doesn't mean that you don't still have the natural right to privacy. The government does not have any constitutional right or authority to invade your privacy.
But if they stop terrorists, I'm super down with that. I'm super down with that. But the reason why we probably, can I just say, I imagine the reason why we have probably not had a 9/11 since 9/11 is because there is so much surveillance. I know they stopped a terrorist attack when I was in college in Santa Monica. It was this guy that he crossed the border and he was going to blow himself up with a suicide bomb vest. And he had a bunch of little bullets inside of that vest. And I know for a fact, they didn't go on like Reddit threads and just like, oh, who is this guy? I know they were probably super, super deep into everything about this person's technology, everything about this person's life. You're not for that?
People who are willing to trade liberty for security deserve neither and will lose both. Benjamin Franklin said that.
Okay, help me understand that perspective.
Okay. If you are willing to give up all of your liberty, all of your freedom, you will be very secure. I mean, this is sort of the premise of iRobot, right? Which is the premise of iRobot was they gave, I don't remember the directives right now, but Isaac Asimov wrote this story about they created these humanoid robots that were way stronger, faster, smarter than us. Right, exactly. Right. But the directives they followed led them to say that the necessary step that had to be taken was to deprive human beings of their freedom and autonomy, right? Because human beings and human error are what are the direct result of a lot of the pain, suffering, waste, loss, damage that we have in our society. Like driving cars, we kill each other doing that, but we have freedom to do that. So I think it's a balance that every society has to strike between security and liberty, freedom and safety. But that's a spectrum. And I think if you're willing to make those trade-offs, eventually you end up in a state like iRobot, which is that every human being who's alive in the country has assigned AI-driven, government-controlled automaton, not automaton, but it would be a humanoid robot that monitors everything you say, think, do, feel, or eat, and behavior and keeps you safe, but at the expense of the human ability to explore the world, discover the world, be free, and have liberty.
I hear what you're saying, but regulations exist for a reason. And I feel like a lot of people who
hold on. I would just say, I'm not advocating for total libertarianism either, right? Because that's a different form of chaos, which is not liberty either. You need ordered liberty. There has to be balance between these things. Like that's what the American system is trying to strike that balance of. Now, we can debate, and this is a political issue, right? Of like where on the spectrum of that balance, different policies should be set, etc. So I'm in favor of ordered liberty. I'm not a radical anarchist or total libertarian, but I'm also not in favor of total authoritarianism either.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm saying part of the argument of, in my opinion, the super, I don't want to say they're not like super pro blockchain people, but the super anti-government people is that if you assume, like, for example, I was talking to someone, a friend of mine who genuinely believes that the government should not be allowed to look into anything regardless of the situation. And because like, I think that would be possible if we could have total and utter freedom and no regulation on anything, assuming that people acted with good intentions all the time. If that makes sense. But that's just not the case. People, the dark web, they sell child porn, they sell children. You know what I mean? I just don't feel like, I feel like regulation is a good thing. Maybe I'm too much on the other side of thinking there should be more regulation. I'm mixing regulation with privacy, but maybe they're intertwined. But
government oversight, maybe some of the
government oversight is the word I'm looking for.
So I think that what you're alluding to there, I think is a James Madison quote comes to mind for me. He said that if men were angels, we would have no need of government. The purpose of the government is to protect our liberty, right? And
protect us from ourselves in a way.
Exactly. So the government is supposed to provide for the national defense. Thomas Hobbes said that the only reason for government or civilization in the first place was to protect us all against the fear of violent death, right? So I agree with all of these things. I'm not advocating, I think, what whoever your friend you're talking about is advocating, or not to put words in their mouth. But
is that super libertarian?
I would say so. Yeah.
Anti-government. And I said, okay, what if there are children being sold on these websites? He goes, well, it's the cost of doing business. I'm like, yo, that's crazy.
So, but that's a political question, right? And like, I think where our society has landed on this is that if there's probable cause, if there's a warrant, if a judge approves, like, et cetera, the government is able to get access to do inquiry into these things and to go look for this information. But like, they do, I think, need to go through that process. It shouldn't be something where if like an FBI agent just decides to read everything you've ever written about anything for any reason, right? They should have total freedom to do that without any sort of government oversight. This is why we have checks and balances, why the judiciary has a check on the executive in this case to say like, okay, why do you want to investigate Claire? Show us some reason why you think there's a reason to violate her privacy, because your constitutional right to privacy is very important and worth protecting too. So there's a system we've created of checks and balances to navigate situations like this, but it's an open question for any society to figure out what that balance should be and how they want to go about maintaining that.
Do you think the U.S. is so? I guess we're getting back into politics like we were a couple weeks ago.
Hi,
which
Claire.
is a good thing. Which is a good thing.
Is it Claire? We'll find out. I didn't mean it to be rude. Anytime people start talking about politics, I don't think it's a good thing anymore.
No.
Go right ahead.
Okay, do you remember
Let's
our last
find out.
conversation?
No, I blanked it out from my memory. Go ahead.
Okay, anyways, I was wondering what...
I was too. No, I was wondering as well.
I was wondering...
I was hoping you'd ask this, by the way.
I was wondering what the balance in your mind is of the privacy versus like leniency, because I think politically you have two sides of the spectrum, which is one side people say, okay, if you have nothing to hide, you should be completely okay with the government going through these things. And then on the other side, people, I guess more on the libertarian side, are saying everything should be allowed. Everything should be allowed. It should be freedom to the max.
So this is a spectrum, right? So like we talked about this a little bit last time. There's a lot of different ways to think about any political issue, but one of the common frameworks that people use is on the right is individualism, on the left is collectivism, and then on the top of the spectrum is authoritarianism or like total government control, and then on the bottom is libertarianism. So I think a lot of people on different issues will fall in different places on that spectrum, right? So, and that's for a lot of different reasons. I don't know exactly where I would put myself on that. I do lean more towards libertarian and towards individualism because I feel that the gravity of late has been more towards collectivism and more towards authoritarianism, and from both parties too. I'm not like saying like that's the direction we've gone as a country economically, socially, politically, in a lot of ways. And I think that one of the powers and strengths of America, like in Democracy in America, Alexandre de Tocqueville said that the strength of America was that we don't wait for a king to come solve problems for us, but we go to community centers like churches, which is what used to be in New England when he came to visit. And we solve problems collectively there. Like the Amish community still does this. When somebody needs to build a barn, they call it a barn building, and they all get together and build the barn for them. And it's a way that they, as a community, invest in their neighbors so they can all participate in their economy together. So I think that is a great virtue of having a society that is a little bit more decentralized and a little more autonomous. And it also gives freedom for political variation. In other words, like you don't have to have the same exact set of policies in Beverly Hills, California as you do in Austin, Texas, or in Miami, Florida, or Mobile, Alabama, right? Like the things that work well in those locations are going to work differently, work differently to different degrees of success in different places. So that's one of the principles of Burkean conservatism as a political ideology comes from, is like conservatism is not about like protecting the environment in that context politically. It's about conserving the customs and political traditions and policies that have been really effective for that community in that locality, as opposed to making everything in an enormous diverse country have to be all uniform about everything. Obviously, we need some level of central government. This is why we moved from the Articles of Confederation, which was very weak central government, very weak executive or no executive, towards the Constitution, which does have a presidential executive. But I think over time, especially in the last 100 years, of necessity and out of political expedience, a lot of power and control has been concentrated into the executive, into the president, and we've gotten this rise of this imperial presidency, so to speak. And it's not, I think, long-term healthy for the country. So I would like to see a move more towards individual autonomy, individual responsibility, individual accountability, and away from government authoritarianism, and more towards a more libertarian view that allows for more people, more organizations, more companies to solve problems and to participate in creating healthy and thriving communities in our country.
Yeah, because I talked about this with my last guest, Steve Levine, when we talked about the difference between how China developed themselves versus the US. There did come a point where the US decided to take a full pivot and focus on clean air, clean water, importing cheap goods. And it was, he said, we developed a sense of not in my backyardism. And versus China, that was like innovate, 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 and look at where they are. He would say that they're actually more on a level playing field than we think. And I think.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a great point to bring up. One thing that China did was with rare earth minerals specifically, there's a lot of like toxins that are created in the process of mining and refining rare earth minerals. So the United States took that. We don't want to do that here in our communities because it creates a lot of toxins. China was willing to do it. And as a result, now they have a huge bargaining chip on the international geopolitical landscape playing field of being able to say, look, we control the ability to get magnets to manufacture a lot of the most important hardware and weapons that you guys have. So you have to do business with us. So that is true of that. And I think the other thing too is that China has not gone along with a lot of these climate agreements, and they've
that's a good point.
Yeah,
they've always just walked to their own drumbeat, basically.
Well, they didn't sacrifice coal and other things. They were more concerned about increasing their energy output, energy capacity, economic output, and we were more concerned about the short term suppression of growth in energy and economic output in exchange for a cleaner or less carbon pollution.
But who would you say is better off? Right? Aren't they both good in different ways?
Depends what you mean by better off. It depends on what your objective, what you're trying to optimize for.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. I feel like both of them in terms of health, wealth.
I mean, I'm glad I don't live next to a plant that mines for rare earth minerals, but
you might soon.
Also
it's coming back to the backyard. Let me tell you that much.
We'll see where it lands, but I don't think they're going to do that in Manhattan.
In Gramercy, there's just a wide pathway.
Well, that would help rent prices, I guess.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming. This was a very eventful episode, and I'm excited to see what we talk about next.
Thanks, Claire. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate it.